Let it be, the Buddhist art of letting go. There comes a moment in every life when the weight of the world feels too heavy to bear. The heart, once vibrant and full of hope, grows weary, burdened by loss, regret, or the relentless march of time. It's in these moments of quiet despair that the simple, soothing phrase, "let it be," rises like a soft whisper, a refuge not just of words, but of profound wisdom that has journeyed through the ages, echoing the timeless teachings of the Buddha. For those of us who have traveled many roads and witnessed the cycles of joy and sorrow, "let it be" is more than a comforting refrain. It is an invitation to embrace a truth that can transform the way we live. That peace does not come from fighting against life's difficulties, but from learning to accept them with an open heart. In the Buddha's own words, centuries ago, he taught that suffering is woven into the fabric of existence. Life, he said, is marked by dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, pain, and change. But suffering is not the end of the story. Through understanding and acceptance, there is a path to liberation. There's an old Buddhist tale that captures this beautifully. Once, a monk was traveling with his teacher when they came across a raging river. The monk was terrified of crossing, fearing the swift currents. The teacher simply said, "Flow with the river, do not fight it." With hesitant steps, the monk allowed the current to carry him safely across. This story reminds us that resistance only deepens our suffering, while surrender, acceptance, opens the door to peace. This gentle wisdom is echoed in the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese monk who taught that acceptance is the key to peace. He encouraged us to embrace our pain like a mother holds her crying child, not by pushing it away, but by meeting it with compassion and understanding. In this way, pain softens and the heart opens. In our later years, as we reflect on the seasons we have weathered, these teachings gain new meaning. We learn that clinging to what once was, or what we wish could be, only breeds frustration and sorrow. Instead, by allowing ourselves to truly let it be, we find space to breathe, to heal, and to awaken to the beauty that still surrounds us. The Buddha's insight into impermanence, the understanding that all things change, is a cornerstone of this wisdom. Like the petals of a lotus flower, blooming and then falling away, life unfolds in cycles. Nothing is fixed or forever. When we resist this truth, we suffer. When we accept it, we find freedom. So how do we begin to embrace this path of acceptance? The first step is kindness toward ourselves and others. It is a compassionate recognition that we are all fragile beings, caught in the same web of change and uncertainty. When we soften our hearts to this reality, we can begin to release the heavy burdens we carry. In these pages and in this journey, you will find the gentle guidance of Buddhist teachings, timeless stories of resilience and love, and practical wisdom to help you cultivate a life of peace, even in the midst of difficulty. Because let it be is not a call to surrender to despair, but a courageous act of opening to life just as it is. Remember the words of the Buddha, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." When we learn to let go, to accept, and to be present, we discover that peace has always been waiting inside us. By the time we reach the later chapters of our lives, we've all walked through the garden of joys and the shadows of pain. We have felt the sweet warmth of love and the cold sting of loss. We have watched friends and family depart, seen our own bodies change, and felt the world around us shift beneath our feet. This experience, this weaving of pleasure and pain, is something the Buddha recognized as universal, something that binds all beings together. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha clearly states the first of the Four Noble Truths. Dukkha, or suffering, is an inescapable part of life. This suffering is not limited to obvious pain or trauma, but includes the subtle dissatisfaction and unease that often lurk beneath our everyday experiences. The ache of growing older, the quiet grief of things no longer being as they once were, the disappointment when hopes go unfulfilled, these too are forms of suffering. Why does suffering arise? The Buddha taught that it comes from tanha, craving or attachment. We grasp tightly to people, to possessions, to youth, to identities, hoping they will bring us lasting happiness. But all of these are impermanent. The flowers we cherish today will wither tomorrow. The faces we love will age and change. The comforts we hold dear are never guaranteed to remain. There's a poignant Buddhist story that illustrates this truth. Once, a wise teacher asked his students to hold a handful of water tightly. They tried their best, but the water slipped through their fingers no matter how hard they clenched. The teacher smiled and said, "Trying to hold on to what is fleeting only causes frustration. The way to peace is to open your hand and let it flow naturally." This simple lesson teaches us that clinging to impermanence only deepens our suffering. This insight is crucial, especially as we age. Society often glorifies youth and accomplishment, but Buddhism invites us to see the beauty in all stages of life, even in the inevitable changes and losses. It asks us to shift from resisting the flow of life to embracing it with gentle awareness. In the words of the ancient Zen master Dogen, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. This teaching reminds us that our suffering is tied to the illusion of a fixed, separate self, clinging to permanence. When we begin to loosen this grip, we open ourselves to a deeper connection with life as it truly is, ever changing, ever moving. Practically speaking, this means that when sorrow arises, whether from the passing of a loved one or the fading of our own strength, we are invited not to turn away or bury these feelings, but to meet them with compassion. Like the Buddha, who sat with his own pain and taught others to do the same, we learn that acknowledging suffering is the first step toward freedom from it. Consider the story of Kisa Gotami, a woman who lost her only child and was overwhelmed by grief. Desperate, she went to the Buddha seeking a remedy. The Buddha asked her to bring a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She soon realized no such household existed. Everyone experiences loss. Through this realization, she understood that suffering is shared by all beings, and this understanding helped her begin to heal. This story is a powerful reminder that suffering is not a personal failing, but a universal truth. It invites us into a community of shared humanity, where no one is truly alone in their pain. From this compassionate standpoint, Buddhism teaches that the path through suffering is not denial or escape, but acceptance and transformation. We cultivate mindfulness, being present with our experience without judgment or resistance. We practice metta, loving kindness toward ourselves and others. We develop wisdom to see impermanence not as a threat, but as the very nature of life that allows growth, change, and renewal. So as we reflect on our own lives, it is natural to feel the sorrow of loss and change. Yet, within this reality, there is also an invitation to awaken, to recognize that suffering, while inevitable, is also the soil from which compassion and wisdom grow. Let us remember the Buddha's teaching. Pain is certain. Suffering is optional. It is through how we relate to our pain, whether with resistance or acceptance, that determines our experience. By opening our hearts to this truth, we begin to release the heavy burdens of attachment and find a quiet peace that carries us through the inevitable storms of life. At the heart of our suffering lies a powerful, often invisible force: attachment. It is the silent thread weaving through our memories, identities, and hopes, a thread we clutch tightly, believing it will protect us from pain. We hold on to who we think we are, the roles we've played, the people we love, and the dreams we've nurtured. Yet, this very grasping becomes the source of exhaustion and sorrow. Buddhism reveals this truth with gentle clarity. Everything in life is in constant flux, like a river that never stops flowing, never pauses. The Buddha likened existence to a river, reminding us that no matter how fiercely we grip, the water will slip through our fingers. The more we resist this flow, the more we suffer. This isn't a call to detach in a cold, indifferent way, but an invitation to soften our hold with kindness and wisdom. Imagine a child holding a fragile butterfly. Grip too tight and it will be crushed. Hold it too loosely and it will fly away. The delicate balance is in loving with open hands. The ancient teachings tell us that attachment, upadana, arises from craving, tanha, a desire for permanence in an impermanent world. We crave security, certainty, and lasting happiness, yet the very nature of life defies these wishes. Mountains erode, seasons shift, and people age. Clinging to the illusion of stability only deepens our pain. A classic story from the Buddha's life beautifully illustrates this. Once, a man named Angulimala was feared for his violent past. The Buddha, instead of condemning him, showed him compassion and the possibility of change. When Angulimala tried to grasp onto his old identity as a fearsome bandit, he found suffering and isolation. But when he began to release that attachment and embrace a new way of being, he discovered peace and freedom. This story reminds us that our identities are not fixed cages, but evolving stories. When we cling rigidly to who we were, we resist who we are becoming. This resistance is a root cause of suffering. The toll of attachment is felt deeply in everyday life, especially as we age. We cling to youth, to health, to familiar routines. We hold on to memories, sometimes with a painful nostalgia that prevents us from fully living in the present. Buddhism invites us to gently examine these attachments and ask, does this grasping bring me peace, or does it deepen my suffering? The practice of letting go is not easy. It is a skill cultivated through mindfulness and compassion. It is the willingness to face discomfort without retreating into avoidance or denial. As the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh said, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. Practically, this means embracing change as a friend rather than an enemy. It means allowing our emotions to arise and pass like clouds across the sky without trying to hold on to them. It means loving others without the need to possess or control, recognizing that true love honors freedom. Consider the metaphor of the lotus flower. Rooted in muddy water, it rises clean and beautiful each day. Our attachments are like the mud, but through mindful practice, we can rise above them, finding clarity and purity in the midst of life's messiness. In practical terms, cultivating non-attachment involves observing our cravings without judgment, recognizing the transient nature of thoughts, feelings, and external circumstances, practicing generosity, not just in giving possessions, but in offering space in our hearts for impermanence, developing patience with ourselves as we learn to loosen the grip of attachment slowly. The Buddha taught that when we loosen these bonds, our energy is no longer drained by futile resistance. Instead, it flows freely, enabling us to live with greater joy, compassion, and wisdom. Attachment's toll is heavy, but the path to freedom lies in a gentle release. Through kindness to ourselves and others, through mindfulness and steady practice, we learn to flow with life's river rather than struggle against it, finding in that flow a deep, unshakable peace. The path of non-attachment, loving freely. Love is often spoken of as the highest human experience, yet it can also be the source of our deepest suffering. The Buddhist path reveals that the secret to love's true power lies not in possession or control, but in freedom. Freedom for ourselves and for those we cherish. The beloved Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh famously said, "True love is about freedom." At this stage in life, where time has gently revealed the fragility and beauty of all things, love transforms. It becomes less about clinging tightly and more about appreciating fully. Imagine holding a bird in your hand. If you squeeze too hard, the bird cannot breathe and will struggle to escape. But if you hold your hand open and soft, the bird may choose to rest there, free and unburdened. This simple image captures the essence of non-attachment in love. It teaches us that to love freely, we must release our grasping and possessiveness. The Buddha himself illuminated this path. In the Sigalovada Sutta, he counseled on right relationships grounded not in domination or desire, but in respect, generosity, and freedom. He taught that clinging breeds jealousy, fear, and suffering, while letting go fosters peace, trust, and genuine connection. This truth resonates deeply for those of us who have lived long enough to see how attachment can distort love. We may hold on to people not because of who they are, but because of what they provide us, a sense of security, identity, or comfort. We fear loss so much that we try to control, possess, or change others, unknowingly suffocating the very love we seek to nurture. One of the Buddha's disciples, the great Ananda, once asked how to deal with grief over lost loved ones. The Buddha replied with compassion, to remember that love is not the clinging to form, but the enduring connection beyond physical presence. This teaching invites us to honor love as a living flow, not a stagnant possession. Another beautiful story comes from the life of Milarepa, the Tibetan yogi. After years of hardship and solitude, he realized that attachment to worldly things and even to people brought pain. Through his practice, he discovered that love rooted in freedom, the freedom to be oneself and to allow others their own path, is the purest form of love. Practicing non-attachment does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. Rather, it means opening the heart wider. It means loving without the need to own or control, loving without fear that the beloved will change or leave. It means embracing the beloved as they are, with all their imperfections and freedom. Practically, this path invites us to recognize our fears and desires that drive attachment in relationships. Practice generosity, not just of possessions, but of spirit, allowing space for others to be themselves. Cultivate trust in the natural unfolding of relationships, understanding that change is part of love's expression. Offer compassion to ourselves and others when attachment causes pain, knowing that all beings seek happiness and fear suffering. Embrace impermanence as a friend, seeing love as a dynamic dance rather than a fixed possession. The toll of attachment in love is profound. It breeds jealousy, anxiety, and suffering. But the liberation of non-attachment brings joy, peace, and a deeper connection. When we love freely without chains, love becomes a source of strength that supports both giver and receiver. As the Buddha taught, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. In the same way, attachment does not end suffering. Only love free from grasping can bring true peace. For those walking this path, the reward is a heart that can love fiercely and tenderly at once, a heart that can give and receive without losing itself. This is the essence of loving freely, non-attachment as the gateway to boundless compassion and lasting joy. Cultivating patience and mindfulness. In today's fast-paced world, patience is a rare and precious gem, one that many of us lose sight of amid the constant rush for results, success, or relief from discomfort. Yet, that the Buddha taught us that patience, shanti, is not merely a virtue, but a fundamental practice that opens the door to true peace. Patience means more than waiting. It means breathing deeply through frustration, learning to hold our difficulties with gentle acceptance rather than resistance. It's the ability to stay present when life feels challenging without being swept away by anger, anxiety, or despair. There's a beautiful Buddhist story that captures the essence of patience. Once, a farmer's mule fell into a deep well. The farmer worried about what to do. Instead of giving up, he patiently began to fill the well with dirt. At first, the mule was scared and tried to resist, but gradually, it realized it could step on the dirt and rise higher and higher until it finally climbed out to safety. This story is a powerful metaphor for how patience and steady effort can help us rise above our struggles, step by step. Mindfulness, sati, is the art of fully inhabiting the present moment, of tasting our food slowly, really listening when someone speaks, or simply resting in silence without distraction. It is a practice that transforms ordinary moments into sacred opportunities for peace. The Buddha emphasized mindfulness as the key to liberation. When we practice mindfulness, we stop being prisoners of past regrets or future worries. Instead, we ground ourselves in the now, where life truly unfolds. Thich Nhat Hanh, the revered Vietnamese Zen master, often described mindfulness as the miracle of being awake and aware in the present moment. He taught that when we truly taste our food, feel the breath flowing in and out, or listen with full attention, we connect deeply with life's richness, and this connection brings profound contentment. In our everyday lives, cultivating patience and mindfulness means slowing down intentionally. When frustration arises, whether stuck in traffic, waiting for news, or facing a personal challenge, we pause. We take a deep breath, acknowledge our feelings without judgment, and remind ourselves that this moment too will pass. While eating, we savor each bite, noticing textures and flavors, rather than rushing through a meal distracted by screens or thoughts. In conversations, we listen not just to respond, but to truly understand and connect, offering our full presence as the greatest gift. This practice nurtures a peace that no external event can disturb. It is a refuge that protects us from the chaos of modern life. Consider the story of the Buddha's own meditation under the Bodhi tree. Before his enlightenment, he faced fierce temptations and distractions. Yet, through patient mindfulness, he remained rooted in the present moment, ultimately awakening to the true nature of reality. His journey teaches us that patience combined with mindful presence leads to clarity and freedom. Furthermore, patience is essential in our relationship with ourselves. We often demand immediate transformation, forgetting that change unfolds slowly, like a seed growing into a mighty tree. Buddhism reminds us to be gentle with our progress, honoring the process without impatience or self-criticism. The benefits of this practice ripple outward, fostering compassion for others as we recognize that everyone is navigating their own struggles in the present moment. In essence, cultivating patience and mindfulness is an act of love. Love for ourselves, love for life, and love for the shared human experience. It invites us to step out of the frantic race and into a space of calm presence where we discover that peace has been available all along, waiting quietly within. Renunciation. Letting go to gain freedom. Renunciation is often misunderstood in the West as giving up everything, renouncing the world, possessions, even joy. But in the heart of Buddhism, renunciation is not about deprivation. It is an act of courage, a conscious choice to release what no longer serves our peace, so we can live more lightly, more freely, and more fully. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, and renunciation is the antidote. It's not about abandoning life, but about embracing it with open hands, letting go of the burdens that weigh us down, whether they are material things, toxic relationships, limiting beliefs, or painful emotions. One ancient story beautifully illustrates this principle. A young prince named Siddhartha lived a life of luxury, but saw the suffering of the world beyond his palace walls. He courageously let go of his royal privileges, possessions, and even his family, not out of rejection, but out of a profound longing for true freedom. This act of renunciation was the first step on his path to enlightenment. Renunciation invites us to ask, what am I holding on to that blocks my peace? Is it fear of loss, desire for control, a need for identity? When we honestly confront these questions, we discover that many of our attachments are chains disguised as comforts. The ancient sages remind us that life's true joy lies not in accumulation, but in simplicity. The less we carry, the lighter our steps become, and the more room there is for love, compassion, and connection. Consider the metaphor of the bird again. When held too tightly, it struggles, but when released, it soars. Renunciation is the choice to open our hands and trust that life will support us, even when we release what feels essential. In practical terms, renunciation can look like letting go of material excess, recognizing that possessions do not define our worth or happiness. Releasing grudges, anger, and resentment, which burn the heart from within. Surrendering rigid expectations about how life should be, allowing space for life to unfold naturally. Choosing forgiveness, both for others and ourselves, freeing us from the prison of past hurts. The Buddha taught that renunciation brings not loss but freedom, the freedom to engage with life deeply, without fear or clinging. It is in this freedom that we find true joy and simplicity. Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully summarized this when he said, "Sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy." Renunciation opens the heart to this smile, that spontaneous joy arising when we let go and simply be. Renunciation also nurtures connection. When we are not bound by attachments, we can relate to others more authentically and compassionately. We meet them not with expectations, but with openness and presence. In the end, renunciation is a sacred invitation, a call to freedom that asks us to trust ourselves and the flow of life. It asks us to step lightly on this earth, carrying only what nourishes the soul. Through this letting go, we discover the profound truth the Buddha lived and taught, that true wealth is peace, and true freedom is the heart unburdened. Living Let It Be as a way of life. Let it be is more than a comforting phrase. It is a profound practice that, when embraced, transforms our entire way of being. At this stage in life, with the clarity that comes from experience, Let It Be invites us to engage with life fully, yet without the clinging and grasping that cause suffering. This practice means accepting change as the natural rhythm of existence. The seasons shift, bodies age, relationships evolve, and the world around us moves in an endless dance of transformation. To resist this flow is to add friction and pain to our lives. Instead, by adopting a mindset of gentle acceptance, we allow life to unfold without the heavy weight of resistance. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we hold tightly to how we wish things to be, rather than how they are. Letting be is the art of releasing this grip, opening our hands and hearts to what is, without judgment or fear. One story from the Buddhist tradition illustrates this beautifully. A master asked his student to carry water in a fragile vessel. The student tried to grasp it tightly to avoid spilling, but in doing so, he caused the vessel to crack. The master then advised holding it lightly, with care and openness, allowing the water to flow gently without fear. This teaches us that life is best lived with relaxed attention, not rigid control. Let it be also means loving without possession. True love, as the Buddha and modern teachers alike have emphasized, is not about owning or controlling, but about freeing both ourselves and others to be as they are. When we love without attachment, we open a space where love can flourish authentically and deeply. In daily life, living Let It Be calls for mindfulness and trust. Mindfulness anchors us in the present moment, where we observe thoughts, emotions, and events without becoming entangled. Trust invites us to have faith, not blind faith, but a deep understanding that life's unfolding, even when uncertain, carries the potential for growth and peace. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "Trust life, trust yourself, let it be." These simple words remind us that surrendering control does not mean passivity, but is an active embrace of life's mystery. Practicing Let It Be also involves accepting imperfections in ourselves and others, recognizing that flawlessness is an illusion. Releasing the need for outcomes to be a certain way, whether in relationships, work, or health. Allowing emotions to arise and pass naturally, without clinging or aversion. Cultivating gratitude for the present moment, even amidst challenges. The fruits of this practice are profound. A heart that is lighter, a mind that is clearer, and a life feels spacious and free. Instead of battling the currents, we learn to swim with grace and ease. The Buddha's own life embodies this teaching. After years of intense seeking and struggle, his awakening came not from forcing change, but from profound acceptance, a complete letting be of his mind and experience. This awakening is available to us all when we live with openness and trust. In embracing Let It Be as a way of life, we align ourselves with the natural flow of existence. We find that peace is not something distant or conditional, but something already present, waiting quietly in the midst of life's unfolding. The wisdom of Let It Be is a gentle but powerful invitation, one that calls us to trust in the unfolding of life, to rest fully in the present moment, and to let go without losing the capacity to love deeply. It reminds us that true peace is not born from controlling every circumstance, but from embracing freedom, the freedom that arises when we release our tight grip on what we cannot hold. In the Buddhist tradition, this freedom is the heart of liberation. The Buddha taught that suffering springs from clinging and resistance, but when we cultivate surrender, not as weakness, but as courageous acceptance, we find a profound peace that no external force can shake. It is a peace rooted in the realization that everything changes, and that by flowing with life instead of fighting it, we uncover the true nature of happiness. There is a timeless story of an old Zen master who, when asked about the secret to a peaceful life, simply replied, "When you let go of your grip, your hands become free to embrace." This simple truth echoes the essence of Let It Be. When we loosen our grasp, we make room for compassion, joy, and grace to enter our hearts and lives. As we walk this path, living with calm and openness, we become living examples of this ancient teaching. Our presence, steadiness, and kindness quietly inspire those around us. In our willingness to accept life's impermanence and uncertainty, we offer a beacon of hope and serenity in a restless world. This is the legacy we carry forward, not just words or ideas, but a way of being that transforms suffering into wisdom and struggle into peace. Each moment of mindful acceptance plants a seed of freedom, nurturing a garden of compassion that extends far beyond ourselves. So let us hold the spirit of Let It Be close, allowing it to guide us gently through life's joys and challenges. Let us trust that even in the unknown, there is a deeper harmony at work, inviting us to rest in its embrace. And in doing so, may we not only find our own liberation, but also become a living testament to the enduring power of peace. A peace that is born not from control, but from the freedom to simply be.